Here's the paragraph you requested. Clint wasn't giving her a choice, and she knew it. He wasn't doing this for publicity, wasn't trying to make a statement. This was personal. Still, Annie hesitated, and after a long pause she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clint exhaled. We'll figure it out. The words hung in the air, loaded with more meaning than either of them cared to unpack just yet. He pulled out a crisp stack of $100 bills and handed it to her without ceremony. Annie stared at it, unmoving. I don't need— Take it, Clint interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's not a damn handout. It's a start. Her fingers trembled as she took the money, gripping it like it might disappear if she blinked too long. This wasn't just cash. This was a lifeline. But Clint wasn't done. Without another word, he pulled out his phone and started dialing. Let me know if you need any changes. Here's the paragraph you requested. Clint wasn't giving her a choice, and she knew it. He wasn't doing this for publicity, wasn't trying to make a statement. This was personal. Still, Annie hesitated, and after a long pause she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clint exhaled. We'll figure it out. The words hung in the air, loaded with more meaning than either of them cared to unpack just yet. He pulled out a crisp stack of $100 bills and handed it to her without ceremony. Annie stared at it, unmoving. I don't need— Take it, Clint interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's not a damn handout. It's a start. Her fingers trembled as she took the money, gripping it like it might disappear if she blinked too long. This wasn't just cash. This was a lifeline. But Clint wasn't done. Without another word, he pulled out his phone and started dialing. Letty he. Me know if you need any changes. Here's that part restructured. Annie shifted uncomfortably in her seat, hating the idea of being someone's good deed for the day. But Clint turned to face the woman fully, his jaw set. It's not kind, he said, his voice steady. It's what should have happened a long time ago. The woman blinked, caught off guard by his words, before giving a small nod and nudging her. Son along. Clint turned back to Annie, his gaze softening. Come on, let's get out of here. For the first time since he sat down, Annie didn't argue. She let him help her up, her grip weak but firm. The cameras caught it all, the way Clint guided her toward his car, the way Annie clutched the money like it was more than paper, but a second chance. By the time the video hit the internet, it shattered headlines. Clint Eastwood rescues homeless woman, flooded social media. Interviews were requested, statements made, and celebrities chimed in. But Clint didn't care about any of that. Because for the first time in over 50 years, he had done right by Annie. Clint ignored the noise from the world around them. Because this wasn't about saving Annie. It was about giving her back the life that had been stolen from her. A week later, Annie sat at the kitchen table of a modest but warm home in Carmel by the Sea. A real bed, a stocked fridge, a place to breathe. Clint sat across from her, sipping coffee. No cameras, no reporters, just the two of them. You gonna be okay? He asked, watching her carefully. Annie smirked, setting down her mug. Been okay this whole time, cowboy. Clint huffed a small laugh. Yeah, sure. But they both knew the truth. She had been surviving. Now she could finally start living. Sometimes life pulls people apart. Time steals moments we thought we'd always have. But the past has a way of circling back when we least expect it. It's never too late to right a wrong. It's never too late to do what should have been done in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, it's never too late for a second chance. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's make kindness louder than silence. Clint sat at the curb outside the gas station, feeling the weight of the nothingness around him. He swallowed hard. He had been filming blockbusters, making headlines, living his life, while Annie had been fighting to survive. Something burned. In his chest, an anger, with no place to go. Why didn't you ever reach out? He finally asked. You knew I would have helped. She gave him a look, not of anger, not even resentment, but understanding. That's not how it works, Clint, she said softly. You don't ask for help when you've got nothing left. You just survive. And that hit him harder than anything else. Clint sat there, silent, the weight of Annie's words pressing down on him like a lead vest. She had survived, but at what cost? The world had moved on without her, without even noticing she had slipped through the cracks. That didn't sit right with him. Behind them, the gas station door chimed as someone walked out, coffee in hand. A couple by the pump stole glances, whispering to each other. People were starting to notice. A man in his 30s, holding a phone, lifted it discreetly. Clint knew the drill. The moment someone recognized him, cameras started rolling. He was used to it, but this wasn't for show. Annie noticed too. She shifted. Here's the paragraph as a single one. Annie shifted uncomfortably, adjusting the plastic bag in her lap, her fingers curling around the handles. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something else. Clint, she murmured, barely moving. Her lips. People are watching. He didn't care. Let them watch. He stood up slowly, his body stiff from crouching too long. The young guy recording hesitated, unsure if he should lower his phone or keep filming. Clint met his gaze. You waiting for something? Clint asked. The man stammered, caught off guard. Sorry, I just... Then put it down, Clint said, his voice calm but firm. The man obeyed, slipping his phone into his pocket. The couple at the pump quickly turned their attention back to the gas meter, pretending they hadn't been eavesdropping. Clint sighed, rolling his shoulders before looking back at Annie. She was still sitting there, holding onto that bag like it was the last thing she owned in the world. It probably was. You need a place to stay? He asked softly. Let me know if... You'd like further adjustments. Here's the paragraph you asked for. Clint's words were more of a statement than a question. Annie shook her head almost instantly. I'm fine. Like hell you are, Clint responded. She exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand across her forehead. Look, I appreciate the concern, but I don't need some charity case moment with Clint Eastwood. I've made it this far on my own. Clint crossed his arms, barely acknowledging her deflection. Her eyes shot up to his, and for a second, he thought she was going to tell him off. But instead, she just sighed, her shoulders sagging. She was tired. Not just physically tired, but in a way that years of hard living could do to a person. Before she could argue again, Clint reached into his jacket, pulling out his wallet. I'm getting you a motel room, he said, his voice firm. One with heat, a shower, and a damn lock on the door. You don't like it? Tough. Annie opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe, just maybe, she was ready to stop running. The world had been watching, but no one expected what Clint did next. The silence between them stretched, and Annie's lips parted like she wanted to fight back, but the words never came. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks. He reached the door, but her voice stopped him. They used to call me Annie. The name landed like a weight in his chest. Clint froze. The door to the gas station was inches from his hand, but the name stopped him cold. Annie. It wasn't just a name. It was a memory. A face from the past, blurred by time but suddenly crashing into focus. He turned back, his breath slow and measured, but his heartbeat had picked up. Annie. It couldn't be. She studied him, her lips pressing together as if waiting for the realization to hit. And it did. Hard. 50 years ago. Los Angeles. A different world. A different time. Clint wasn't the legend then. Not yet. He was just a man on the rise, juggling fame, the pressures of Hollywood, and a personal life that always seemed to be unraveling. And Annie? Annie was the woman he let slip through his fingers. The memories unraveled like a reel of film playing in his mind. She had been a waitress at a little diner he used to visit after late-night shoots. Back then she was young, sharp, full of fire, the kind of woman who didn't care who he was. She gave him attitude, sarcasm, and the best damn coffee in town. They spent hours talking, laughing, and arguing about everything and nothing. But life had pulled them apart. He became busier, movie roles piled up, and his name grew bigger than he ever imagined. And Annie. She disappeared. No goodbye, no trace, just gone. Now here she was, sitting on a curb outside a gas station, looking nothing like the woman he once knew, yet somehow still the same. Annie, he said, the name feeling foreign after all these years. She gave a small, almost sad smile. Took you long enough. Clint ran a hand over his face, trying to understand what he was seeing, what he was feeling. What the hell happened to you? His voice was rougher than he meant. Annie exhaled, shaking her head. That's a long story, cowboy. But Clint wasn't leaving without an answer. He crouched down, his knees protesting, but he didn't care. His eyes never left hers. Annie's face had disappeared from Clint's life without a trace. But here she was, older, worn down by time, but still the same. And she had clearly suffered. You think you could handle the long version? She asked, her voice a mix of amusement and pain. Clint didn't reply immediately, just watching her with a quiet understanding. There was something deeper in her words. This wasn't just a rough patch in life. It was something much more. I've got time, Clint said, offering her the space to continue. Annie exhaled slowly, her gaze drifting toward the passing cars, to people who didn't stop or care. I left LA in '79, she began, her voice softer now. I figured I'd had enough of chasing dreams that never worked out. I thought I'd start fresh. Went to Sacramento, got a job at a bookstore, met someone. We got married. Thought it would be a good thing. Clint didn't flinch. He already knew where this story was heading. But when she spoke again, the words hit harder than he expected. But he wasn't a good man, she said, her fingers tightening around the plastic bag in her lap. It started small, some control here, a little. Here is your paragraph. Gaslighting. There. Before I knew it, I wasn't me anymore, she said, laughing bitterly. You ever wake up one day and realize you're living someone else's life? That you're a stranger in your own home? Clint clenched his jaw, recognizing the pain. He had seen it before. Friends, people in the industry, women who stayed because they had nowhere else to go. I tried to leave, she continued, her voice cracking, but he made sure I had nothing. No money, no car, no family left to call. I stuck it out for years because I thought, I don't know what I thought, that he'd change, that I could fix it. She shook her head, clearly disgusted with herself. Stupid. Clint said nothing. He knew better than to call her that. I finally ran in '99, she said, her eyes darkening. Left everything, just grabbed a bag and took off. Spent the next few years bouncing from place to place. Every time I got my footing, something knocked me back down. Jobs dried up. Landlords hiked the rent. And before I knew it, this was my life. She gestured around them, to the world that had become her reality. If you'd like to make any changes, or need further edits, feel free to ask. Here is your paragraph. He thought he was just being kind, but instead, he walked into a moment that would change his life forever. The morning air was cool as Clint Eastwood drove his car along the winding coastal road in Monterey, California. The Pacific Ocean stretched. Out beside him, its waves rolling in gently, a sight he had grown to love over the years. At 94, he still enjoyed moments like this, being alone, listening to an old jazz tune, and feeling the freedom of the open road. He had no rush. Retirement had made time feel slower, but he still liked his routine. A stop at his favorite gas station for coffee, maybe a quiet moment on the pier before the day truly started. But then something caught his attention at the edge of the gas station parking lot. By the gas pumps, an elderly woman sat on the curb, wrapped in layers of worn-out clothing. Her thin body seemed lost beneath the fabric. She clutched a crumpled plastic grocery bag in her bony hands. Her shoes, old and falling apart, rested against the cold concrete. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just sat there, staring at something far away, as if lost in her own world. People walked past without a second look. A man in a business suit stepped out of the store, coffee in hand, barely noticing her. A mother hurried her child along, turning slightly as if to shield them from seeing the woman. Even the gas station clerk leaning against the door glanced at her for a moment before disappearing inside. She wasn't begging. She wasn't causing trouble. She was just there. Clint tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He had seen people like her many times before, the forgotten, the ones who faded into the background of a world too busy to care. Normally, he would have kept driving. Maybe it was a sign of age, or maybe just the weight of too many years spent, watching the world lose its kindness. But something about this woman made him stop. He pulled into the gas station, cut the engine, and just sat there for a moment, studying her. Something felt off. She wasn't just another lost soul on the streets. There was something familiar in the way she sat, the way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her bag. And when she finally lifted her head, her sunken, weary eyes locked onto his. That's when Clint saw it. Recognition. It was subtle, a flicker at first, a tightening around her mouth, the way her gaze didn't just pass over him like it did with everyone else. She knew him. But Clint couldn't place her, and that unsettled him. Clint stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching under his boots. The gas station was quiet, except for the occasional hum of an engine pulling in and out, and the distant cry of seagulls circling overhead. The woman didn't look away as he approached slowly, careful not to startle her. Up close, she looked even frailer than he had first thought. Deep lines carved into her face, her skin weathered like parchment left out in the sun too long. Yet, beneath the wear of time, there was something else, a quiet strength, an endurance that hadn't yet crumbled under the weight of years. She squinted up at him, her lips parting slightly, as if trying to form a thought she wasn't sure she wanted to say. "You need anything, ma'am?" Clint asked, his voice steady but gentle. She exhaled, almost like a laugh, but without humor. "Didn't think you'd recognize me." Clint's brow furrowed. There was a rasp in her voice, the kind that came from years of smoking, or maybe just time wearing a person down. "I don't," he admitted honestly. She nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the plastic bag. In her lap, the plastic bag crinkled under her grip, the contents inside shifting slightly, though he couldn't see what she was holding on to so tightly. "You used to," she murmured. A silence settled between them, heavy, but not uncomfortable. Clint was no stranger to lost memories creeping back when he least expected them. In his line of work, faces blurred, voices faded, and time twisted everything together until the past became a fog he could only sometimes navigate. But something about the way she looked at him made him feel like this wasn't just another face he had forgotten. Still, he didn't push. Instead, he motioned toward the gas station. "Can I get you something? Coffee? A sandwich?" For a moment, she didn't answer, just looked at him like she was trying to decide if this was real, if he was real. Then finally she nodded. "Coffee, black." Clint gave a small nod in return and turned toward the store, but just as